Hello and welcome to Say Hi to the Future, Ingenious Thinkers, a podcast aimed at highlighting the human side of ingenuity. My name is Ken Tencer, curator of Say Hi to the Future, helping leaders think differently in the face of uncertainty and ambiguity. Better thinking, better outcomes. With me today is Tobias Katz, Vice President of Construction and Design at ootBox, designing and building the most productive spaces under and sometimes over 100 square feet. Like this video if you enjoy our show and subscribe to our channel. Leave us a comment with who we should interview next. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the show. Tobias Katz, welcome to Say Hi to the Future.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So, Tobias, right now you are VP Construction and Design for ootBox, designing and building the most productive spaces under and sometimes over 100 square feet. But you've had a path to this position that I'd like to start with. This journey, at least, started for you as a senior thesis project at the Columbus College of Art and Design.
Yes, it actually started as a very excited freshman at Columbus College of Art and Design. As a freshman, I joined I believe it was the Give Back hackathon in Columbus, and fell in love with the startup ecosystem and the ability to get to be a part of a bigger thing than myself. Through that, I met some really interesting people and didn't end up joining a startup at it, but had a lot of fun, worked really hard. I, at that point, fell in love with food ecology and how we could start to become closer to our food systems. Fast forward a couple months, I met a couple people and we formed a startup that was based around bringing fresh herbs and leafy greens to restaurants by growing them in their parking lots or in the square footage that they already had. By having this ethos, the best possible way that we could think of to do it was to use a shipping container. This was in 2013. So we were amongst one of the first people to start using vertical farming techniques in shipping containers. And now there are a bunch of different startups who do it. And it really got me inspired to start to look at these building blocks that exist all across the world. And we have an entire infrastructure system for them, and start to think about how to make them productive as modules in your everyday life. It started with food, and then through talking about food, I realized that eating doesn't do you any good if you don't have somewhere where you can stay and somewhere that you can live. In school, I then became very obsessed and interested in the tiny house movement. And for the next few years, I started researching and learning every single thing I could possibly learn about tiny houses. Through my schooling in CCAD, I learned that the best ideas should be tested, and if they can hold up to different reviews and different theories, then it really is a good idea. I tried to prove myself wrong that a shipping container wouldn't be a good housing solution for a tiny house for the next few years. And ultimately, I wasn't able to do that. And so for my senior thesis, I had the idea and follow through to build a tiny house, which I built on CCAD's campus out of a 20-foot shell. In order to do it, I needed to figure out how to pay for it. Like many college students, I didn't have huge access to resources. I had the idea to use my tiny house and senior thesis project as a conduit for local businesses to sponsor my final piece of education. This came through the great experience that I had throughout my time at CCAD by being a part of what they used to call special topics courses. I think they might still. where a company comes in and sponsors the class for a semester. And it gives students the opportunity to use real world techniques, learn from industry professionals, and then ultimately get to leave with this portfolio piece that could be a real product. The most exciting one that I was able to be a part of was, I think 2 semesters with it, was the Airstream project at CCAD, where we actually got to build the trailer and then we got to design a couple different ones for them to ultimately use. And that experience gave me the idea that, hey, why don't I go out and try to fundraise every single thing in my tiny house? Fast forward to the start of school, and I realized that CCAD, like most colleges, are broken into semesters. And I wasn't going to build in the winter time because I was building outside. And so I had the idea that I should do all of my fundraising and all of my designing in the first semester, and then all of my building in the second. We live in Ohio, and unfortunately, we had snow and ice up until about March. And so the building didn't really start till March. But I'm very happy at the fact that in first semester, I was able to raise about $35,000 worth of in-kind donations from 22 different companies. And that was every single thing you saw in the container house. From donations that were very large, like my appliances and my finished materials, which were actually donated by Airstream, to the really smaller things like my finished paint that was donated by Sherwin-Williams, or even like my mini split HVAC system. Once all of those things were donated and I had them in hand, I had to ultimately build it. That took place between mid-March to the start of May. And in about 6 weeks, I built the entire house with the help of every single friend I could possibly make. And a couple of those local companies who had donated. So
That's amazing. Yeah. So Tobias, I mean, you know, they say diamonds are created under pressure, and you certainly proved it with that last 6 week build. But so let's unpack a few things, because that's an amazing story, and the notion that it started with vertical farming. It didn't start at all with tiny houses or, you know, the concept of the modular type container. It just started with the notion of farming and how you could bring that to a more urban area, or just capture it wherever you were. One of the things that you said after you walked through farming and you walked through the basic concept was you wanted to prove to yourself why you couldn't do it. And I thought that was a really interesting approach, because so often we hear these are the reasons we can or need or must do it. Why did you take that reverse sort of approach to your hypothesis testing, if you will?
my professor in school, Tom Gaddis, had a great saying when we would talk about the special topics courses, and how he sold them to the companies was brilliant. That when you're working in industry, you have to convince your board and your panel to think outside of the box. And students don't know that a box even exists. In school, I didn't. I hadn't built products that had gone internationally. I hadn't done these things that I'm now doing, but I knew that we had to define what I wanted to do. And I couldn't just start with the idea of, I'm going to build a tiny house and hope to be ultimately successful. I wanted to use it as a conduit to start a business and to help me build the type of creative practice that I'm still working on building. And that comes with self-reflection and self-critique. Part of being a good designer and a good creative is knowing that you don't live in a vacuum, and letting as many people as possible discuss the design and work through the design and concept ultimately helps make it stronger, and long term helps it apply to as many people as possible. And I didn't want my thesis to feel insular or based on just my needs. I wanted it to apply to a lot of different people. And by getting different feedback from a breadth of experience, I feel as though I ended up with a much better product, and a product that went through those rounds of revisions before it even got built.
Right, right.
Because I only had time and material to build one.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not 10 versions. Uh,
Well, hey, I mean, you got to start somewhere. So no, I think
exactly.
that's, yeah, no, and I think that's an amazing way to look at it, and the way you have to, that self-reflection. I think that's an amazing way to take pause and to understand where you are, and as you said, think outside of the vacuum, rather than the box. The other thing that I found really interesting, just from perspective of being a student at CCAD, and full disclosure, Tom Gaddis, he was a dean of industrial design at CCAD when you were a student. He's now a business partner at Spiderworks, which is a parent of Say Hi to the Future. One of the things that I found amazing, or find amazing, about Tom, and I met him 2007-ish in Savannah, Georgia, at Savannah College of Art and Design, and he was doing the same thing. He was going out to the community, to big companies like Airstream, and he was working on projects that integrated their challenges and the thinking of students. And for me, that just must have been an amazing opportunity.
It really was. It awoke in what the industry was to me while being under the umbrella and protection of an institution like
Mhm.
CCAD. It was this great way to try and fail without worrying about a salary, without worrying about overhead, and the things that are very real when you enter the industry. And being able to create these pockets is something that I really do credit to Tom and my experience at CCAD. It's actually part of why I ultimately joined the school, was because they had special topics courses. And I thought it was just a really interesting way to go to college.
It's amazing, and yeah, as somebody who's been in industry but also works or lectures with students, I think that anything that can provide exposure of students to professionals or organizations is critical. To me, I think that reverse mentoring is so important in getting out into the world. And since you mentioned that, you are now out into the world, and you're wearing
Yeah.
a T-shirt that says ootBox. What is that? How did your journey at CCAD with farming, tiny houses, containers, turn into your career?
I graduated uh, from CCAD in May of 2017. And I had graduated bright eyed, bushy tailed, and had this tiny house. And fortunately, the Columbus Dispatch, one of our larger local newspapers, wrote a feature on me. I graduated on a Saturday, and on Monday, someone called me with a project. This client had the idea for me to build a shipping container house. They knew I had no LLC at the time. They knew I had no idea what I was doing, but they had the idea, and they were willing to invest in me to figure out how to do it. And so through talking with this person, we figured out what my essential rate was going to have to be to allow me to figure out how to do it. He agreed to put me on retainer for a year so that I would be able to, by the end of the year, have plans for him to build the house. But then have me figure out how to build multiples of them. After that year, we were the first group in Ohio to have a shipping container home break ground. And I'm very happy to report we've built 2 of them. They are 11 containers all combined into a duplex that each side has about 1,200 square feet, 2 bed, 2.5 baths. And right now, those are actually rented by Honda as seasonal workforce housing in Marysville. So when people come to Marysville and visit to work at the Honda plant, they can be put up in our duplex. That taught me a lot, but it also taught me that I was one person, and it took me a really long time to learn and to learn all of the little steps that it took to build a duplex and get a duplex permitted and educate the state on what industrialized units are and all of the fun red tape that I work in. I knew that I didn't want to be a one-man show forever. In that year, I got some good advice to take some time and treat my sort of fresh out of school freelancing as a unofficial graduate school program where I could learn as much as I wanted to about as many different types of projects. But ultimately, after that, I would find a section that I really wanted to work in. I spent after that first year, the next sort of 4-ish years, running lots and lots of different projects, from custom furniture creation to historic renovations to new builds, we at one point did a $100,000 single family house that got built in Columbus, and how we could do affordable housing on a small micro scale of infill lots. I just wanted to learn. And by being one person and being very lean, I was able to try different things every 6 months. While I was doing this, some friends of friends had started a boutique container project called ootBox. ootBox stands for out of the box and is a play on our founder's Canadian, how he says out. While they're working on this, they had only done 10-footers, and we had met each other, and I had consulted a little bit and talked to them a lot about how containers made sense and how we could make this work. And at the end of 2022, mid-year 2022, they had finished a pre-seed round and were looking to expand their team, and they offered to bring me on and had offered to have me lead the design portion and lead the manufacturing section of the business. It's been about 14 months so far, and I can very happily report we've done about 40 projects in that time. We've shipped boxes as far as California and Toronto. And we've done everything from little 10-foot backyard offices to completely off-grid projects that went to Burning Man. And through joining a team, I've been able to really focus on what I do best, which is design and figuring out how to put things together, and get to trust people to help me do the things that I might not be so good at, which is the fun business stuff like raising money and getting clients and helping us, have a runway so that I can build beautiful things for us.
Yeah, you know what, Tobias, as you describe that, it sounds perfect, because you really do need to integrate into a team, whether it's your business or somebody else's, and find your
Absolutely.
space. So it's that's great to hear. The one thing I'm wondering too, just for the listeners as well, like, so it's small, it's easy to put places, you can do a whole bunch of things, with the modularity of the container, but what are the real benefits? Like, Is it an economic one? Is it a sustainability one? Like, why do I want a modular office or a modular home? I mean, what makes me want to even think about that?
Yeah, so it's all of those things and more. So typical construction has a long lead time of stick building things on site. As we look at the long-term trends of the industry and what's coming down the pipeline, prefabrication has been something that we all should be aware of. And prefab works great and it works beautifully. But with all prefab, there's some sort of assembly that has to happen on site. And prefab doesn't necessarily work for a retroactive building where you are rehabbing something that already exists. Our solution, which is modular building blocks, allows people to either build them as a standalone structure, a combined structure, or we have a lot of projects that go inside of existing buildings. Because our solution is a soundproof plug and play box that's completely watertight, completely airtight, we're able to put these in really unique positions. And so, for instance, we have a lot of boxes that are in the logistics world that as businesses grow their warehouses, they need offices that are soundproof and they need the ability to supervise what's happening on the floor. And so they use our containers as these modular solutions that they can move around the facility with their already existing tools, but also have a private and durable space inside that can work for what they need it to. That's one fun solution.
Mhm.
The other thing is our containers are as green and reusable as we can trust. So we use food safe containers, which means they weren't used for anything that was toxic or in any sort of high E or messy industry. So we don't work with things that were in the paint industry and storing toxic material and things like that. But our containers that we often use are no longer certified as travel worthy. So we can use them because we can skin them, we can fix the holes, we can do things like that, but we give a second life to them. It's not cost effective right now in the industry to ship an empty container back to China for recycling. And
Mhm.
so by repurposing it on state soil and giving it a new life, we're creating an added feature that wouldn't ultimately exist and extends the life cycle of the shipping container. And then thirdly, my favorite part about it is we're using an infrastructure line that already exists in the world. So when you want to ship, for instance, we're quoting a kindergarten project right now, we're hoping to beat the traditional portable classroom that I think everybody's seen, where it's a double wide trailer and it's not really built well to move and they often break in transport. What's beautiful about shipping containers is you could put around 400,000 pounds on the roof of a shipping container and it not break it.
Hmm.
That's the equivalent to the Statue of Liberty or a blue whale.
Wow.
That allows us to build these structures that are incredibly durable and can be moved across the world for pretty cheap, and then allows you to build, whether it's an office building or a school, incredibly quickly to get people spaces that they need incredibly safely because there's less job site incidents and chances of workplace safety issues because we're in a controlled factory. Um, and they're beautiful. Um, Everything we do, and this is when I'll try to show you if my Wi-Fi is working,
All
tries
good.
to showcase natural light and really good design aesthetics that help promote a feel good model when you're working inside of this box. And so, actually, this morning we delivered 3 boxes to a local youth crisis and foster care center where they're using our shipping container structures as auxiliary spaces for their kids. And so when the kids need a safe space to sit in and calm down, they can use our box. And then one of the other uses that they're going to use it for is when they talk to their social workers and need a private space to sit in, they can use our containers as well. And so this was a solution that when they're at capacity, they don't necessarily have the development to build a bigger building or to remodel the bigger building. We can provide them with an office or a lounge that can be dropped within. Our entire delivery today for 3 boxes was an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And so, an hour, a couple non-GFCI extension cords, and they have a new conditioned and beautiful space to work out of.
That sounds like an amazing recipe, Tobias. And Tobias Katz, it's gone by quickly. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today on Say Hi to the Future, and you sharing us a lot about ootBox, about your journey, about the benefits of it. So just as our time comes to the end today, you are going to be on the Next Gen panel at Say Hi to the Future, America's Heartbeat in Columbus, Ohio. The panel is called The Future of Leadership is Homegrown. You are certainly an incredible example of the opportunities at Columbus, the education infrastructure, the incubator, startup, scale up infrastructure can provide to somebody. So just give me your closing thought on that infrastructure and how you found that it just helped you along.
My favorite thing about Columbus is, though we are still, a small-ish city, though we have big aspirations and big things coming down the pipeline, everyone is very nice in Columbus. I really have never had a time where I didn't know someone who knew someone who I wanted to talk to. In Columbus, everyone is usually willing to hop on a phone call or sit down for a cup of coffee and talk about what they like about the city and how they want to help make the city a better place. And whether that's with building a startup or just figuring out the type of things you want to do in your free time or for work, Columbus has been a great way for me to expand my network and learn so much about myself and the industry.
Thank you. Wow. There's a ringing endorsement, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more from you on stage. So Tobias Katz, VP Construction and Design for ootBox, thank you again for being part of Say Hi to the Future today.
Ken, thanks so much for having me.